Burlesque Stripped Down, episode number 37. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Burlesque Stripped Down. This is Velvet Eau Claire, your guide through all of the secrets, saucy, sexy, and otherwise, of us, the ladies and gents behind the tassels. Thank you so much for pressing play again today. I do apologize for the short delay in getting this episode up. I did have a bit of a problem with a new editor I was trying out. I was hoping that I would have the files back because I do have a new episode ready, almost ready to go, with the lovely Holly Rubyyy, who was fantastic to get to talk to, and I was really excited to share that with you this week. Unfortunately, the files weren't completed. It's kind of what I get for letting things get out of my own hands, right? And try to get some help on board. So I did try a new editor. Didn't quite work out, at least not in time. I should still have that up for you for next week, but I wanted to make sure that you had a little something. And this actually kind of worked out because it gave me an opportunity to share with you something that I've been wanting to do. I know we have, we're on episode number 37. We've had a lot of new listeners coming on board from a lot of our past interviews with some wonderful big guests like Suki Singapora and Red Hot Annie and everyone like that. So I know there's a lot of new listeners who may not have heard some of the earlier episodes. So in this particular episode, what I've done is I've actually re-listened to one of my favorite early episodes. This was episode number 11 with the fabulous Rubyyy Jones. And I've actually picked out a few of my favorite things, because if you remember, if you were listening back then and you do remember, I was just blown away by Rubyyy and all of the amazing value that she had to share and just really, really inspiring things. So I like to listen to episodes again just for my own sake, not so much to hear my own voice, of course, but to hear some of the words of wisdom from our peers and colleagues in the burlesque world. And so I was re-listening to Rubyyy Jones, and I was reminded of how inspiring she is. And I thought I would like to share that with you as a little reminder if you've already listened to the episode when it went live back in December of 2015. And if you didn't get a chance to listen then, well, then this will be a great little selection of some of her wisdom. And you can always go back and listen to the full episode at burlesquestripdown.com/Rubyyy, Rubyyy. And so here's a little just kind of shortened version, some of the tidbits of some of my favorites. I will pop back in midway through because otherwise it's kind of a jarring transition. So I want to tell you a little bit about what she's going to share midway through. But for now, sit back and listen. I won't go into her whole background. She is a wonderful performer, sex educator, burlesque baby. What she say? She said Broadway baby. That's what it was. Broadway baby. And drag queen. She does all sorts of just really amazing things. And so if you want to know more about her specific journey, you can go back, like I said, and listen to that initial episode. But for now, enjoy just some of these real words of wisdom from her about staying true to yourself, staying authentic, and bringing in, finding that balance between your personas and maybe your real life and all of that kind of stuff. So without further ado, here she is once again, Miss Rubyyy Jones.
Ladies and gentlemen, I am super excited today to have the incomparable Rubyyy Jones joining us on the podcast. She is one part Las Vegas showgirl, one part Broadway baby, and one part drag queen. She has performed all her life and all over the world. Since her debut, she has burst onto the scene, sharing her special mix of elegant and evocative performance magic while working hard to hone her personal stripper POV. And apparently, if you twist her arm to answer, she prefers the title Burlesque Sex Education Performer, with acts which are as thoughtful as they are sensational. Now, Rubyyy, welcome to the show. Tell us a little more about that and say hi to everybody.
Thank you so much, Velvet. Hi, everyone. So I guess that I'm really glad that you used that three ways to introduce me, with the showgirl, the Broadway baby, and the drag queen, because that is, I think, all my acts do have a kind of real balance of different disciplines, and also those are kind of where I'm coming from. I was a music theater kid when I was younger, but also just did dance and competitive dance, and always loved playing with costumes and makeup and things like that, and I'm still doing it, which is great.
Yeah, well, we were talking before the show, and you said you do a lot, kind of a big variety of different things, right, in your life, not just burlesque performing. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, I do. I'm in rehearsals at the moment, and we're going into production next week for a production of Midsummer Night's Dream that I'm in. It's with a queer performance collective at a off West End theatre here in London. And I'm actually playing Oberon. It's got a bit of, though I don't love the term, gender bending.
Very nice. Okay.
Yeah. And it's that's kind of like one of my strings. Like as far as Rubyyy Jones goes, I am Rubyyy. I'm a real live person, but it's been amazing to kind of create Rubyyy as a persona, as someone who is an actress, and then to get roles where I'm cast as my persona basically as well, or my persona is the one going into the audition. As well as doing the burlesque, I do hosting also, and I work at places like The Box and Torture Garden and Kinky Salon, doing kind of more fetish, kind of kink-based work. And in my daytime job, I do voiceovers.
Very cool. And you're based out of London, correct?
I am. I'm based out of London. I'm originally from Canada, from a small town outside Toronto, but I've been in London for almost 10 years, and I really love being in London because I can do all those things and more, and I also have amazing access to Europe and all the cool things that are going on there, and everyone who's doing exciting things there too. Like yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. I know that you were in Paris recently, not too long ago, I guess. I don't know how recently it was. I can't remember anymore. But working with the Letting Go Cabaret, kind of doing a Save the Rubyyy Jones show. And I missed it. I'm so sad now, especially. But it's, yeah, like you said, London and Paris, for me, you know, it's kind of a great jumping off point for the whole rest of Europe.
Yeah, exactly. Like this year alone, I've performed in probably 10 or so countries, and you know that's just possible because of where we are. You know, you're in the kind of throng, whereas, you know, of course, if you went to America, you'd be spoiled for choice as well, but I think it would be you know, take quite a lot of planning, and it's not like, oh, I'm just going to go to Paris the weekend like I did when I took my show Save Rubyyy Jones over there with Letting Go Cabaret. It's not as easy as all that when you're crossing an ocean.
Absolutely. Yeah, I can go to, you know, Atlanta for the weekend when I'm here in Florida, but that's about it. I was going to start out with, what is the one thing that you are most excited about right now? And I know you mentioned the Shakespeare thing, which, by the way, I'm super sad I'm going to miss, because I remember seeing that when I put it on our event roundup, and it looks awesome. Yeah. Just something so unique. Is that what you're kind of most excited about right now?
Well, I'm really excited about that, and I've been, since I kind of made the decision to, around this time actually last year, maybe a little bit sooner, I kind of felt like I missed playing different characters, because Rubyyy Jones is essentially, you know, a character. It's a persona, so in a way it's a little bit more integrative of myself as a person. But I kind of was like, okay, I want to kind of stretch and explore another person other than myself, and not with any kind of heaviness other than, you know, I am an actor, and I love doing that, and it's been really, really exciting to do that. And actually, I will tell you, I can't give you tons of details, but I can tell you that a company in Paris, I believe, okay, so I'm going to say France, but I believe it's Paris, has taken on this Shakespeare script and is doing a production of it. I will probably come and see them make an amazing, their own version of it, but that is happening near you sometime.
Oh, that is so exciting. I'm going to have to find out more details on that once it's kind of released, once it's a little more set in stone.
I will let you know.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, you know, it's interesting you're talking about personas, because, of course, December here, we're talking about Authenticity Month. So it's, we're just talking about, you know, kind of being real in life, in performing, and just true to ourselves. A couple weeks ago, the first week, we talked about, on my Hot Tips episodes, I talked about the imposter syndrome and kind of feeling like, you know, who am I to be doing this? I'm a fraud. Somebody's going to find me out. And they say that even some of the great actors and actresses, even Maya Angelou had that feeling of like, they're going to find me out. They're going to figure out that I'm a fraud. Yeah. And then we also talked about defining success, and then we're talking about some other things like creating your personal brand and such. Yeah. So how do you find, with someone who has such a persona and enjoys taking on these different characters, how do you stay authentic in your performance journey?
I think it really is a process, especially when you're cultivating a persona as opposed to a character. About really understanding where you end and where the character begins, or I guess where the persona's boundaries are. I'll use that word persona more specifically, because persona to me is, again, it's kind of like a kernel of yourself, kind of like a little bouquet of different parts of yourself that get blown up to create this on stage or on camera persona, as opposed to a character, which could be kind of like something you just put on. A persona is, I feel like, not an extension, but that's the only word I can think of right now. It's an extension of a part of your personal expression that gets elevated to be used in performance. And I think a lot of people, it's very natural, and from, you're mentioning other celebrities and things like that, from reading different biographies and different histories of different performers and people who created personas, it's very natural, actually, to go through a little period of time when you're not quite sure where they end. And sometimes that gets people into, I think, kind of dangerous territory. And I've been really vocal about my issues with substance abuse or addiction and mental illness or mental health. And a lot of that came from when I started actually delving into Rubyyy Jones, like really cultivating and finding out what was it I wanted to explore, what was it I wanted to express. I started to live my life as my persona. And it kind of happened one day that I woke up in a kind of a bad situation, and I just thought, wait a minute, this is not me. I don't say yes to this. In fact, I say no to this. And I think it's really natural for people to go through that process when specifically cultivating persona, because you have to really learn your boundaries. And one thing I say to my students when you are going through these really intense kind of artistic phases and transitions, that I think it is really important to be as sober as possible and as clear as possible, and to, as an artist, really cultivate a personal practice to go along with your artistic practice. So something like meditation, or a really regular bedtime, or I only work for this certain amount, or whatever it is, these little boundaries and borders and kind of check marks you can set for yourself so that you're always cognizant in the process. I think that's the thing, like with Facebook and all this stuff, I get wrapped up just like everyone else, but it is like a real thing of like, wait a minute, we all like talk about sometimes, oh, I'm having the most fabulous time and I'm doing this and I'm doing that, but actually we just know it's good promotion. We're actually in a dressing room that's got one cracked mirror and like dusty floor and like, we're like maybe gonna have to pick up our own costume afterwards, God forbid, yeah. We all kind of play with that. And it's like, okay, so when am I, like, as far as authenticity goes and as far as being honest with yourself, it's like, what is the part that's promotion and what is the part that is, reality? And it's very easy when we have, especially as burlesque performers and cabaret performers, we have these kinds of, I know, and a lot of people have said the same thing to me, it's hard for me to have like a me Facebook and a burlesque Facebook. I don't want to go back and forth every time I want to post a different thing. It just doesn't work like that. And so it's really interesting and also challenging for each person to find out, how do I continue to engage with people I actually know and like these different platforms, but also people who I sort of know or people I don't know at all, who want to have a little glimpse at who I am. And I think the other side of that as well, as far as authenticity goes, and I think is important for performers to decide, is like, okay, do you have a Facebook page that is the only place where you interact with people who are fans or who you met once or whatever else, and then you have a Facebook profile where you kind of talk about your cat and what you have for dinner and whatever? Or do you share everything, or do you share glimpses? I think as far as me, my approach, I guess, I don't have any shame. I have some shame, but I really work hard to be quite shameless and challenge myself in being shameless. And that includes, like, for instance, with my Facebook, like, I have no problem talking about, say my anxiety or my issues with depression or my journey with depression, I would say, because I feel like that is part of my brand. Rubyyy Jones was actually born out of writing, and blogging, and I used to do lots and lots of blogging, and I was always very transparent about my wants and my lusts and my desires and all these kinds of things, and that's become for me actually part and parcel of who Rubyyy Jones is as a product, a real glimpse at the person behind the persona. That's kind of come full circle, which I think is really interesting and not right for everyone.
Wow, Rubyyy, there is so much I love about what you just said. Honestly, I think that our listeners might have to kind of like stop and rewind and listen to that again, because so much of what you just said really, really resonated. I know with me, and I'm sure with a lot of people listening as well. Just from, from everything talking about a persona being a part of you that you kind of amplify, that you take these certain parts of you and you just kind of expand on them. That's so true. And then, following up with talking about the Facebook, the Facebook dilemma. And that's, something for me as Velvet Eau Claire, I've had difficulty really developing a persona because, like you said, it's so much work. We've got Facebook, we've got Instagram, we've got Snapchat, we've got Twitter. I can't be logging into 12 different things and logging out and going back. It's too much.
Way too much. And I don't think anyone actually can do the true kind of back and forth. And that's why I think it's kind of like, okay, you either, have a page and you say to people, sorry, this is my private profile. You're going to have to go over here. You get the select stuff. It's still going to be great. Or, you don't put as much on your Facebook and you let everyone on, or you just kind of be shameless about it and let everything out.
Absolutely. And it's just finding out what works for you, being true. Again, authenticity, like being true to whatever feels right kind of deep inside. I know some people, unfortunately, don't have the luxury of keeping things kind of together or being shameless, as you so put it, because of their day jobs or whatever it may be, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, totally. And I really appreciate whatever anyone wants to do. And I think the one thing about discovering that for yourself is it's not cut and dry. You can't just decide, oh, this is what I'm doing, that's the way it is. You have to try a little bit of each thing. You have to kind of, maybe go say, okay, for 3 months, I'm going to put this stuff out there, see how I feel about it. And then I'm going to check in, and then I'm going to decide, does this work for me? And have that real kind of dialogue.
Absolutely. Absolutely. A big part of being authentic in a lot of different ways is to do those check-ins and to really be continually evaluating, what's working and what's not for you.
Sometimes we don't want to check in with ourselves because ourself is going to tell us something we don't want to hear.
Amen.
I think it's really important. And sometimes the hardest decisions have the most great and exciting outcome and offerings to our life. So I think if it is a kind of thing of like, oh, well, I don't want to be out on Facebook because like my mom might find out. It's like, okay, go for 3 months and then see how it feels. But then ultimately, if yourself says, well, your mom's your mom, but not your mommy anymore. And it's like, make that change, make that leap if that's what feels okay. It doesn't mean every like moment of authenticity is going to be painless and seamless.
Well, what would you say is one of the biggest misconceptions about you, kind of in general, or as a performer specifically?
I think one of the greatest misconceptions actually comes from the power of the persona of Rubyyy Jones. I've had people consider me for certain shows where I'd have to make like new work or work to match a theme or things like that, and I've had response actually, we don't think we can actually have you move ahead because they've seen some of your work and they just don't think you're going to be able to do XYZ. And that has really, really pissed me off in the past or made me feel upset because I couldn't do these things I wanted to do. But ultimately, it was a bit of a compliment about the kind of the persona I've created with Rubyyy Jones and the kind of definitive kind of quality of that persona. And I think as well, I noticed that misconception again around this time a little bit earlier last year, and I just decided that was when I was going to kind of pursue characters a little bit more, and I was going to create work that was going to make people go, oh wait, Rubyyy Jones, you didn't take all your clothes off. What happened there? Or, things that were softer or things that showed more vulnerability because, people had this idea of like Rubyyy Jones, fierce, like, this real kind of hard energy. And I kind of wanted to mix that up and realize that misconception was essentially a compliment and also an affirmation of what I created as an artist through Rubyyy Jones. So I just decided, well, this is fully within my power. Thank God I'm in this amazing industry where I know where to go and I can bring different things out, and people are going to, maybe be surprised at first, but are fully going to support it. And I just kind of mixed that misconception up. So now already within a year, I know people have a different idea of Rubyyy. It's not just this kind of totally body naked veracity. It has different qualities now too.
That's a really great perspective on, to take these misconceptions that people might have about you. First of all, take them as a compliment, because they're not saying anything horrible about you. They're, they are essentially complimenting you and the persona that you did work to create.
Yes.
And then if it is a misconception, if it's not what you want to portray, then to think about how you can adjust it. That's a great perspective to have on it.
Yeah. And I just realized that people don't see Rubyyy Jones as a persona. They think that's who I am. And as we discuss with persona, it is authentic to myself, but it is not my whole self. And so I thought, well, if I can share that facet, I can share other things. And I'm very much a believer, even though my spirit doesn't want it sometimes, of slow and steady wins the race. So, I just thought I'm going to take some steps this year to kind of give some different alternatives to that conception, because I wouldn't say it's a misconception that Rubyyy Jones is fierce and, this glamazon thing. But what the misconception is that Rubyyy Jones is all I can do. So now Rubyyy Jones gets the benefit of now being this multifaceted artist, which is great.
Now, in this next section, Rubyyy and I touch on something that I think is a really important conversation to start having in our burlesque world. Not just start having. I know the conversation's been out there for a while, but to continue having, and that is the issue of rape and sexual assault inside of the community, within the community. And we only briefly touch on it here, but I wanted to share her words with you once again as a reminder to continue this dialogue and to continue discussing it amongst our peers and colleagues and audience members and producers and everyone.
There's a real lot of talk about sexual assault and sexual abuse and violence and rape in the burlesque industry. And one of my acts actually talks about rape, and in the act it talks about statistic of 1 in 5 women are sexually assaulted or raped, and I believe that number is much higher. And one person talking about it is giving more people space to talk about it, but is giving that many more people space to even think about it and feel through it and actually have a kind of process, because not everybody needs to talk about stuff publicly, but more people need to, or some people need to, so that other people have space to actually feel seen and a kinship and a kind of sisterhood. And that's been really intense, but really amazing to witness as well recently in the scene.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point as well, because it's not that necessarily that everybody has to go out there and do these socially active pieces. It doesn't need to be, kind of filled with that. And if doing something a little more glitzy and fun and focusing solely on those are more your thing, that's okay too. But it is important to have some people having the conversation, or starting the conversation anyway.
Exactly. That's the thing. We don't want everybody doing that. Obviously, if everybody turned around tomorrow and wanted to do an act about their personal journey as a woman and their experiences of sexual assault, whatever, fine, I'd be totally supportive of it. But I do not at all think that is necessary. I think it's necessary for there to be constant dialogues. I think it's really brave and exciting and inspiring when women who, a lot of them just do more glittery, sexy kinds of sensual acts, but then they're using their platforms to step outside of that and talk about that. And then other people are doing acts that talk about that and kind of reflect that. And I think that's what's really amazing about the industry. It's so rounded and it's so changeable, and also globally we're so affected by each other without even knowing it. And I think even though Facebook is really annoying sometimes, it's really exciting in that way as well.
And in this last little section, Rubyyy gets back into some of the importance of staying true to yourself and really listening to what your inner voice is saying, and not to get too wrapped up in some of the glitz and glamour that can come in, not just in burlesque, but in everyday life in general. We can get, I know me, for one, I get so wrapped up kind of in new experiences, and I get very, very excited about things, very infatuated very quickly, and that can cause me to lose myself a little bit sometimes. So again, her amazing words just remind me that it's so important to listen to myself and to take those moments to take a nice pause and really hear what I'm actually wanting and really trying to say.
You know, I can't say this is the case for all global scenes, basically, but I know there's a real pressure in London to be like busy all the time, to be working all the time, to be seen here, to be seen there, do that show, do this show. And I just feel like, what's the rush? You know, I used to be someone who was really, you know, a girl about town. And, you know, I'd be here, I'd be there, I'd be doing this, I'd be doing that. And I was exhausted. And I had no relationship with myself. And I was stoned all the time. And, you know, I was not really in it. I was just there. You know, my visage was there, basically. And now I'm much more about having kind of boundaries with myself and having downtime and having quiet and having, you know, allowing myself to have what seems like a much less glamorous life, because I'm not like drunk, you know, 12 hours of the day and like going to fabulous parties and swirling around London and ending up at the W Hotel and this and that. But I am healthy and grounded and have space of like a kitten and a partner and a quiet house. And then I go and do the fabulous gigs and it's amazing. I travel to other countries, but then I come home and I have a home base and I have a grounding. And I think any time where I would have felt that was because I didn't have a personal practice. I didn't have a space for myself to exist beyond this creation. And, you know, when you're working in character or you're working in persona, you have to remember, like, this is an actual living piece of art, and it is not designed to exist all the time. You know, it's nice on Facebook to offer support to people, but can you genuinely give something all the time? No. So maybe just say, you know, hope you're well and whatever else. Don't offer everyone your ear. Don't offer everyone your time. You know, always give yourself that time in kind, because that's anytime I've felt that darkness of like, you know, I don't want to do this, or I don't want to be here, or I don't know where I'm going. It's because I've given myself no space and no time and very little graciousness, basically, very little gentleness. And I think it's very easy to do. We want to have the gigs done. We want to get to a certain place. You know, you want to be seen here. You want to do that. But if you're real about it, and if you're in this industry for realsies, you're going to take your time getting there.
That's great advice with being authentic, with developing this real internal sense of peace, you know, to develop your multifaceted, you know, you can't just, I mean, maybe some people can just go wholeheartedly, you know, into the whole scene all the time, but I highly doubt it. I haven't met anyone yet who is 24/7 their burlesque person, you know.
And again, like, don't compare yourself to other people. Like, just because that person seems to be able to do 10 gigs a week and still go to yoga at 6 a.m. and do whatever, like, that's not you. If that's not you, don't aspire to do that, you know. Like, do your own, do you. And
absolutely.
If you don't know what that is, take some more time to figure that out. And you're not going to figure that out swirling about town necessarily. Like, have some quiet time and figure that out.
Absolutely. Find your own definition of success, your own definition of peace within.
Yes, exactly.
This has been really wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing your authentic journey with us, and I'm sure we will talk to you and see you again soon.
Sounds good. Thanks so much, Velvet. Thank you.
And there you have it. Once again, thank you so much to Rubyyy Jones for coming on back in December. I'm sure she is up to all sorts of wonderful things, and I would really love to have her and all of my guests really back on again at some point. For those of you who are very intrigued by Rubyy's story, I do not blame you. Definitely head back to burlesquestripdown.com/Rubyyy, RUBYYY, to hear her entire story and everything that went along with it, including her answers, of course, to the pick your poison and this or that sections as well. I did not include those here. So I hope you enjoyed this little flashback episode, kind of reminding us of some of the great things that she had to say. If you like this episode, I'd be happy to do more of them, kind of condensing down some of the wisdom that my guests have had to share, some of the great insights that they have. And so definitely just send me an email and let me know what kind of episodes you're liking, what you're not liking, what you'd like to hear more of or less of. You can do that, velvet@burlesquestripdown.com. Of course, Instagram me, Velvet Eau Claire. Twitter me. No, that's not a thing. Tweet at me, Velvet Eau Claire as well. Facebook is Burlesque Stripped Down, and I would love to hear from you in any way, shape, or form. So please do not hesitate to get in touch through any medium that you prefer. And later this week, I'll be back at you with my July favorites episodes. I have a lot to share with you of some of the most amazing things that happened in July. And then next week, barring any more difficulties, I will be bringing you the fabulous Miss Holly Rebel. So definitely stay tuned for that. In the meantime, share this with all your friends. Really percolate on some of this wisdom that Miss Rubyyy Jones had to share with us. And once we're able to find that balance between all the different aspects of our personality, well then, I have a feeling that we won't have any problem staying sexy.